Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Welcome back. I hope you've all had a chance to refresh and hopefully also had a chat with someone you don't know in the networking area. I think, Bex, you wanted to pick up on the questions we had earlier.
Yes, I did. A very, very pertinent question that somebody asked was around if Trig is awarded on a match-funded basis, and the answer is no. Trig is 100% funded, so you are not required to contribute any money towards your project. However, if your overall project value is greater than the amount you're applying for in Trig, for example, if you're running a very large project that, say, the total amount is £50,000, say, and you can only apply for £30,000 out of Trig if you're going for the £30,000 grant. So the extra £20,000 you'll have to find yourself. But you can, if the project costs £30,000, you will get £30,000 from Trig.
And we do like to see leverage. We do like to see bigger projects that come out of those £30,000
Absolutely,
grants. Absolutely.
Yeah. But 30,000 is the maximum that we can go to, or £100,000, of course. In future afraid.
Yeah. Although those may be quite competitive. Those 100K grants.
They may be quite competitive. Yeah, they will be quite competitive.
Awesome. Well, next up on the main stage, we're going to have our EDI panel discussion. So I'm delighted to welcome Amanda Azoka Jarrett, who's a colleague from CPC, who's going to moderate the session. And alongside her, we'll have Dr. Katie Petherick from Innovate UK and Simon Brown from Tech Tower. Amanda, how are you doing this morning? You well?
Yeah, I'm all well. Thank you so much, James. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm going to hand over to you.
Great. Well, hi, everyone. My name's Amanda Azoka Jarrett, and I've recently joined the Connected Places Catapult as an SME development manager. I'm also a long-term enthusiast for equity, diversity, inclusion. Previously, I was part of the Economic and Social Research Council's EDI committee, and I've also co-founded a Women's Network for Women in International Affairs. So I am very excited to be moderating this panel today. And really, the focus of this panel discussion is to really better understand the important kind of implications of equity, diversity, and inclusion for business and innovation, and to provide more kind of actionable tips and advice that all of you can use to better kind of implement and employ EDI in your businesses, whether or not you're a startup, you're a founder, you're working in an organization, and just want to create a better working environment. Equity, diversity, and inclusion has really important implications for all of this. And before I move on, to introduce the panelists and to the main discussion, I also think it's really important to kind of clarify what I mean when I say equity, diversity, and inclusion. I'm sure a lot of you are aware of, inherent forms of equity, diversity, and inclusion, and this really focuses on the traits you're born with. For instance, ensuring that within an organization, the senior management team is gender representative, or that the staff composition, acknowledges and celebrates people of different ethnic backgrounds. But it's also really important that in the discussion, we don't negate something called, acquired forms of equity, diversity, and inclusion. And this is really about kind of building environments whereby people have traits gained from different types of experiences. For instance, ensuring that you have staff members who are experienced selling in a particular market, because of course, when you are creating your innovations, this means that in terms of prototype testing, they could be more equitable, diverse, and inclusive, and that you can also kind of scale your innovations globally and gain business growth through that. So joining us today for this discussion, we have Katie Petherick. Katie is the EDI program leader at Innovate UK, and we also have Simon Brown. So Katie and Simon, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. We're so happy to have you here for this very important topic. Would you both like to introduce yourselves and talk about some of the work that you're doing in equity, diversity, and inclusion?
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much for the invitation to be here today. Hi, everyone. My name's Katie. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a white woman in my mid-30s, and today I'm wearing glasses and I've got my headset on, so hopefully you can hear me okay. As Amanda said, I work at Innovate UK, which is the UK's innovation agency. So we're here to support the best ideas from across the UK through funding and also connections. And we are really interested in diversity and inclusion because we believe that a brilliant idea can come from anyone across the UK, and we want to be able to support those people to really develop their ideas and be successful with it. And so within our work, we do this in a number of ways. We obviously have a lot of funding, and we're looking at how we can incorporate diversity inclusion into our funding process, how we encourage businesses to be thinking about it through that process. One of the key areas I work in is looking at our policies and our whole systems that we use to see how we can make them more accessible for everyone. And then really working with the businesses and the sectors more broadly to recognise the impact that diversity and inclusion can have on businesses, and to support them to really develop their EDI policies and processes in a way that suits the business and the organisation itself.
Great. Thank you so much, Katie, for the lovely introduction. Simon, I'll just hand it over to you.
Well, thanks very much, Amanda. Hi, everybody. I'm Simon Brown, CEO of Tech Tower. I am white, middle-aged man and an engineer. So your typical stereotype, if you like, in the engineering community. My background was I was head of IT architecture at Heathrow Airport from 2017 to 2020. And while I was there, I introduced a project called Fly to Plan, which was drawing upon Innovate UK funding. My background, obviously working at Heathrow Airport, is one where actually equality, diversity and inclusion was something which was very high up on the corporate agenda, making sure that the community that we serve and the people that are serving that community look like the people that are flowing through an airport. It's very easy to design systems and solutions that suit the people and the typical engineers that might think they know what they're expecting to see at an airport, but actually miss the mark for the people that will actually end up using the products and services that an airport offers. So that really opened my eyes to the issues around designing for user experience and making sure that we are, as engineers, are as inclusive as we possibly can be, to make sure that we've got a diverse view and opinion and backgrounds into those engineering solutions. And it was while I was at the launch event for the Future Flight Challenge back in 2020 in February, just before COVID hit. It kind of hit me square on, which was that of the conference that was organised over the 2-day event, pretty much everybody looked like me, except some had less facial hair, some had less hair on the top of their head, and some were more grey than others. And that really struck home that actually, as an engineer and as a human that's designing solutions that need to be human-centered, we needed to do better when our projects actually kicked off. And I was proud when we got to the launch event and the kickoff event of our Future Flight Challenge project, which has now been running since November last year, that we actually, on the Zoom call that we had, obviously with COVID having hit, we had a almost record-breaking 25% women represented within the project itself. So that was a Herculean effort to make sure that we didn't conform to the kinds of groupthink and the kinds of traditional ways of thinking, and actually embrace bringing diversity into that project team. So that's a bit about my background and a bit about why equality, diversity and inclusion is important to me.
Great. Thank you so much, Simon. So I'm just going to move on to the questions now. So, a lot in the mainstream, there's been a lot of discussion on equity, diversity, inclusion. And according to a global study conducted by the Boston Consulting Group in 2019, companies with above average total diversity actually had 19% higher innovation revenues on average. Almost 1/5 higher innovation revenues they were able to yield because they were more diverse. So Simon, this kind of question is particularly for you. As CEO at Tech Tower, why do you think a diverse team is more likely to be innovative and more profitable? You've got a lot of experience managing and cultivating a team. You talked about the importance of, human-centered design, ensuring that projects are really reflective kind of the communities they're representing. And also as a CEO, you are in a very pivotal position to really ensure that diversity is within your organization. Like, why do you think it's important for a team to be diverse in order to achieve more better innovative goals and be more profitable?
Well, exactly as I've touched on, I think it's all about making sure that we're designing solutions to leave the world in a better place than when we found it. And if we've missed out that 50% of the population that are female, then that's clearly not going to sell to a much wider potential audience and potential customer base. So it absolutely makes business sense to make sure that you've got that diversity of thought within your organization, and having that diversity of thought can make sure that you're meeting the needs of a much wider customer base than you would normally reach if you didn't have that. So from a businessman's perspective, absolutely makes sense to drive that agenda and make sure we've got balance. Now, having said that, if you do take a look at our website, we are a small company. There's 10 of us, and 10% of us are female. There's only one female within my company at the moment.
Yeah.
So I was delighted yesterday when we went to a trade show, and we had a potential new recruit come up to our stand and talk to us and get a real sense of the kinds of culture that we want to bring into the company. And she was hopefully going to be sending her CV over to us and potentially doubling our number of female employees. So I'm really excited to be able to put out a message that our company is really hoping to attract women into it. And I think the challenge that we also recognise, and having spoken to my team this morning about coming onto this panel session, is that when we look at engineering disciplines and science disciplines, there's just not the women coming through the system that we need as an industry in engineering. And I think perhaps some of the challenge around that is that the engineering degrees and those scientific disciplines are naturally competitive. They're not collaborative. Those degree courses tend to pitch people against each other, whereas actually what you need as engineers is people who are collaborative, more willing to work together.
Yeah.
And engineering is inherently collaborative. You cannot solve many problems by yourself. You have to work together. So I think there's perhaps an image that we need to portray back to the wider industry, that engineering isn't all about the big machines and the computing. It's about people coming together. And if we're excluding 50% of the population out of that coming together, then we've failed. So I think engineering needs to start embracing that concept that collaboration is absolutely key.
That's really good to hear, and I'm sure that's definitely something that your company will probably be working on a lot more. Of course, as the CEO, use something you can you've got the power to actually do. So that's really good. Thank you so much, Simon. And I wonder, Katie, trying to get your perspective, working for on the institutional level of equity, diversity, and inclusion. You did say in your opening statement that you really focus on helping SMEs embed EDI within their organizations. So I wonder if you can talk about some of the benefits and successes you've seen from businesses when they have incorporated EDI, whether this has been within their staff, other parts of their operations.
Yeah, and I would definitely echo what Simon's saying there, is that it can be a real challenge for small organisations when they're just starting up. It might be because of the location you're in, which isn't particularly diverse, particularly ethnically perhaps, and the resources that you have to be able to develop it. But I think there's a number of different ways that people can incorporate diversity and inclusion into their business and then get the benefits from it. So there is the team itself, and as well as being diverse, it needs to be inclusive as well. So the statistic you mentioned was about diversity, but then there's also statistics showing that an inclusive workforce, so this is one where you have a diverse team, but they also feel part of the team and able to contribute. I think it was a Deloitte study said that those companies were 8 times more likely to be successful. So it's really thinking about the culture of the organization as well as who's working in it. And as Simon said, he's really trying to develop that culture, which is brilliant. So that's the team. And you get massive benefits from the different insights and perspectives there and challenges within those teams when people feel confident to contribute and question ideas and thoughts. There's also the perception of thinking about your customers as well. So if you are you have business to customer transactions, then you're potentially really focused on the customers that you're engaging with. And there's some research done by We Are Purple that shows that companies in the UK are losing £2 billion a month by ignoring the needs of disabled people. And so this really shows that you need to be thinking about your audience as a whole and the wider demographic, and really challenging yourself to, are you reaching everyone who you could be reaching there? And then obviously massive benefits there financially and reputationally as well for businesses. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Katie. And, I know, Simon, you kind of touched on the fact that, engineering still has, a large role to play in kind of changing its perception so it can attract a diverse candidates kind of much more easily. Would you say kind of EDI is equally important, for all kind of business sectors, or there's certain sectors even that can benefit differently from better diversity inclusion? For instance, we look at transport industry, and we know, for instance, that's known as, not necessarily being as inclusive, especially in terms of gender representation as well. So yeah, this is something probably I'd like both of your viewpoints from. Simon, I'm sure you have some great thoughts on this, and Katie as well. I know you've probably got different businesses across sectors, but do you think the EDI issue is, specific to certain sectors, or do you think kind of all businesses can benefit from a better EDI approach?
Certainly, if I can answer first, I think all businesses need to think about the equality, diversity, and inclusion. I think it goes without saying that if you are a business that's serving a wide range of customers, and you want to make sure that your products are meeting the needs of that wide range of customers, then represent those customers with your employee profile. It's quite simple because if you can't see the company that's building the product that you can relate to, then quite clearly you're potentially alienating a market. So I think it absolutely makes sense. But as you rightly say, engineering does have that perhaps perception of being more gender imbalanced than any other, possibly because of the kinds of engineering that goes on, which is heavy machines, information technology, and the kind of dropout rate, I guess, when you see the number of entrants going into the university system, means that there's a much smaller pool to draw from when you get to the industry itself. So I think recognizing that engineering and transport solutions in its own right is much more about the user-centered design than the machines themselves, and perhaps conveying that message more that it's not just about the nuts and bolts and bits and bytes. It's about making sure that these capabilities are actually helping humans to move their goods, connect with people far easier, and make sure that you've got nobody left behind, nobody left out of the system. I think that's the key message that we need to make, that transport inherently has to be inclusive to meet the needs of society at large.
Yeah, I'd agree with all of that. And I think some of the challenges that we get is businesses who aren't customer focused, so they're business to business transactions, and they rightly in some way question why EDI matters to them if they're just building something which is then going to go into an aeroplane or something like that. And that's where the team really is important. But actually the innovation itself, you still need to be considering diversity and inclusion, because there was some news reports a few years ago about cars with electric motors, and how obviously this is really positive for our green agenda, but actually because they're so quiet, it's had a negative effect on pedestrians who are blind or partially sighted, who rely on being able to hear to know where they are. And so even if you are just developing a car component, there is that knock-on effect, and so you really need to be thinking about that bigger picture there. And so yeah, diversity and inclusion fits into all businesses in some way.
Great. Thank you so much, both of you. So, I think we've really highlighted the benefits of equity, diversity, inclusion. But now I really want to kind of focus on what are some of the practical things that, SMEs, especially the smaller businesses, can be doing. For instance, Simon, if you think about kind of smaller organizations, they don't necessarily have the luxuries as organizations like Innovate UK, who have the finance to employ, EDI kind of consultants, EDI champions like Katie here. How do you think founders of early stage companies can still embed EDI internally whilst also prioritizing business growth? And also it'd be great to hear what are some of the things that you've done. You did say you were able to get I think a second female candidate into the organization just recently. You know, what things have worked for you?
So for me, I think the challenge with being in a small company is and being in a startup is perhaps that image that, you know, every day is a hustle day, and it shouldn't be that way, because if we're excluding people that, you know, potentially don't have the luxuries of being able to, you know, draw upon family, that you know, if perhaps you're a single parent, you might not be able to, you know, get out to a conference and stay overnight and do all those kinds of things that you often take for granted. So having been through the pandemic over the last 18 months and recognizing that an awful lot of what we would normally have done to get projects up and running and implemented, we've managed to somehow, and through the power of these kinds of mediums that we're on right now, we can get an awful lot of work done without having to leave our homes, without having to traipse across to the other side of London and then stay overnight, etc. And that inclusivity is fantastic, because what we've learned now is that actually we don't need to hire specifically within the local region. We can hire people, you know, from wherever in the country to be able to work with us and collaborate with us. So we're feeling now that we're less tethered to a place, and we're more inclusive to be able to offer that the opportunities to people that don't necessarily have the ability to travel to an office every day. Having said that, we do like to meet every now and then, and we meet once a week, and we have a staff meeting, and what we're doing now is creating that space in our staff meetings to talk about these kinds of issues, to make sure that we are, you know, being inclusive and not just talking about the work. We're talking about the challenge with society at large, and making sure that we are an inclusive company. So it's setting that agenda and creating that space in your company to have the conversation is really important. Otherwise, it does tend to become very task focused and task driven, especially when you're in startup mode, because it is quite often hand to mouth, trying to make sure that you've got the next customer lined up, and you've got the next bit of revenue lined up. So having that culture is really important, and also setting the example as well. So I'm not a presenteeism manager by any stretch. I'm always trusting my team to get on with the job that they can do in the way that they feel best to do it. And if that means, you know, doing the school run, if it means popping out in the daytime to post a parcel, that's absolutely fine. I trust you to get the job done. I don't hire you to sit in a chair and be babysat all day. So it's all about trust.
Great. And I definitely agree with you when you say, especially cultivating that right culture and spaces, you know, to have some of these conversations that, you know, to be honest, probably before the pandemic, we were less likely to have. I think it's very, very important creating the right environments. So over to you, Katie, just for my next question. You know, obviously working for Innovate UK, which is, you know, the largest innovation funder in UK, I do understand that ensuring grant funding opportunities are inclusive and accessible to a wide range of individuals is one of your key priorities. So in your work that you do, how have you helped Innovate UK become more equitable, diverse, and inclusive in their grant funding criteria and their assessments?
I'd definitely say that it's still a work in progress. We haven't reached the level where we're completely happy with what we're doing at the moment, and we're constantly, similar to what Simon was saying, we're constantly reflecting and realizing where we're putting up barriers to people for applying, and seeing Innovate UK as somewhere that they would want to apply to. Some of the work that we are doing at the moment is we're looking at how we can support disabled applicants to apply and have an equitable opportunity to non-disabled applicants. So this is through providing reasonable adjustments and support for completing applications and uploading them onto the system there. We're also reviewing the whole application process. So we've been trialing some competitions have been using videos as part of the submission there, and that's had a really positive, we've had really positive feedback from both applicants and our assessors as well, in terms of being able to get across the message of their businesses a lot better there. We also really want to look at our questions that we're asking, and that's both in terms of making sure that they're relevant and accessible for everyone, but also prompting those questions about diversity and inclusion and encouraging people to be thinking about it at that stage. And we really recognise that another key partner in that system is our assessors as well, and who they are, what their experience in diversity and inclusion is. And so we're about to kick off a big project where we're going to be supporting the development of our current assessors in terms of diversity and inclusion, and raising awareness for when applications are coming through that are focusing on that. And we also really want to encourage new assessors to come and join us, and we'll be providing training for them as well to diversify our pool of assessors as well there. So we're looking at the system as a whole, but we're also really keen to be attracting new audiences in at the same time. And so we're doing a lot of listening with communities who aren't currently engaging with us, and understanding what barriers we have put up for them and how we can change and adapt our services and provide support before people apply, but then also once they've applied and they've been successful, what additional support can we provide to really enable them to excel?
Great. And I'll just probably on that theme of kind of, assessments and funding criterias, how do you think competitions such as those funded by Innovate UK can better help improve diversity, in particular within the transport industry, and increase the diversity of applicants? As I did say before, the transport industry especially is known as not necessarily being very diverse and being, not really able to kind of attract a wider range of stakeholders.
Yeah, and it can be really hard once you get to the application stage, I suppose, because you will have lost a lot of people earlier on in that career. Like Simon was saying, people coming in through university might decide to not stay in the areas. And so within the funding area, I think it's thinking about different competitions that can be run, so smaller ones, which it definitely sounds like Trig get involved in from what they were saying just before here, but you have smaller amounts so that people just starting up kind of have that safer, perhaps a lower barrier to entry for funding, which they can then build on. But it's definitely, I think, key is the surrounding support around that funding, and how else can you ensure that people can excel beyond just getting a grant.
Great. And so, time is unfortunately really running out. So I'm probably just going to give my final question for both of you. If you could provide one tip or an actionable advice to kind of SMEs, entrepreneurs and founders to better implement EDI in their organizations, what would it be? Maybe starting with you, Simon.
For me, it's simply make the space for the conversation and be an advocate. So look out for your team profile and make sure that you are being proactive in attracting the right blend and mix of people that you need to represent your customer base. So it's as simple as that, really. Don't let your mindset fall into the trap of the people like us type scenario, where you end up actually with a whole organization that will be filled with people that look and think exactly the same as you, and then you might as well not bother, because that's not what you want to serve a diverse and inclusive market that doesn't look like you in any way. So that would be my bit of advice. Just keep aware and just make sure that you're hiring for the right fit, and you're also hiring for the right broad blend of people to represent the markets you're going after.
So Simon took what I was going to say, so I'll expand on that one and say monitor that then, and set yourself aims for it. It doesn't have to be kind of hard targets, but have a plan for where you want to get to, and then you can really build on those conversations and have achievable targets that you can measure whether you're making it or whether you need to change things to do it, so that you can really get it embedded into your processes as early as possible.
Great. Thank you so much, Katie and Simon. I think you really provided some really kind of strong tips and raised some really important points here. I think it's very clear that there is a massive business benefit for kind of better equity, diversity and inclusion that a lot of SMEs and organizations can use to ensure that, they have better working teams, are more productive, they're, creating the right innovations and products that actually suit the markets, they want to enter. So it makes a lot of sense. And so thank you so much for taking time today to kind of speak with, all of us and to provide all of this advice. I think James is going to provide some information to anyone in the audience who wants to contact Katie and Simon further if they have any further questions, because unfortunately we have run out of time.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Amanda, and also Katie and Simon. Really, really informative discussion. Before we go any further, I've got a question for you guys. So, in terms of how we run Trig, have you got any advice for us as to where we should be focusing to make sure both that we get the best diversity of applications, but also that we have that sort of knock-on impact to the sort of wider transport industry?
I can go first. So I think we've mentioned quite a bit today about gender, and I think, of course, that's really important and that's a big focus, but we need to look beyond that as well. So when you're looking at which networks to engage with, to advertise your opportunities, etc., think about the intersection of the people that you really want to attract to be applying to these, I think is a key one. And we're about to do some work to look at networks who we can be engaging with. So more than happy to work with you on that side.
Thanks, Katie. Amanda, Simon, any suggestions from you guys?
I would just add that there are other engineering institutions out there that might be great places to advertise and partner with. So I'm also a member of the IET, Institute of Engineering and Technology, have been for a long time, and also sit on a couple of panels there. And it's a great place to be able to champion the work that you're doing, and also lean on some of their capabilities within equality and diversity and inclusion. Not so long ago, they had a fantastic campaign on 9% is not enough, which raised the awareness of the lack of women in engineering. That's moved the needle a little bit, but there's still an awful lot more to do. So lean on some of those charitable institutions as well.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice. I think the KTN also have a Women in Engineering group that they run. So we'll be talking to them.
Yeah, I think it's really important to tap into the kind of network of networks idea, because ultimately the more applications we get from underrepresented groups, the more percentage will increase of those groups within the chosen cohort. So yeah, that's really, really important.
Yeah, I think as we're looking in Trig to fund complex solutions to complex challenges, and if you're trying something complex, you need that diversity of thought. Otherwise, you're simply not going to get as fit of a solution as you might want. And you heard from the minister that this is a real area of passion for her. And she also alluded to us changing the way Trig bids are assessed this year. So we've asked everyone who applies to give us an EDI statement as a sort of a baseline. But when we come to the really difficult bit of bid assessment, when we've got lots of good bids and they're competing to just be above that line, where we have tie breaks or bids that we think are similarly strong, we'll be looking at those EDI statements, and that is how we're going to be breaking any ties in Trig this year.
Yeah, absolutely, because I'm sure James sort of shares the sentiment, but for me, we, much as businesses will see the value in having a diverse workforce and the benefit that will have for their business, we see the value in our projects having a diverse workforce and a diverse delivery team, because then the value of them, our return on investment will increase. So we can see a huge benefit of it as well. So it's so important.
Brilliant. Well, I'll just say one final thanks to our panel, and thanks Amanda for guiding us through that discussion. It was really interesting.
Really insightful. Thank you so much.